But first up, he represents California's 28th in the House, where he is the Intelligence Committee ranking member, Congressman Adam Schiff. Hey, Congressman. Thanks for being here, and thanks for a lot of things. Thanks for keeping your sanity. Are you keeping your sanity? How are you holding up under all this? What about you?
Doing okay. Yeah. Thank you very much. Every day, a new adventure.
I'll bet it is. So, you know, I sometimes watch the other channels to see what they're saying, because we do live in two different universes. And when I see MSNBC or CNN, it's a lot about what you're saying. On Fox News, the talking point is always, let's just wrap this up, because after all this time, there's no there there. What do you say to the no there there people? Is there a there there?
If there was no there there, James Comey would still have a job. And you know, I think, you know, what I think is so important to get across about this, because at the root of this is, why should people care about this? And as important as the collusion issue is, there's a lot at stake here, even beyond that. And what people need to recognize, the Russians intervened not just because they wanted to help Donald Trump and not just because they hated Hillary Clinton. They intervened because they wanted to tear down our democracy, just as they wanted to tear down the democracy in France with Marine Le Pen, and why they'd like to see Angela Merkel defeated. There is a real struggle of ideas around the world of authoritarianism versus democracy. Putin is leading the autocratic vanguard, and he has imitators in Cairo and Ankara, Turkey, and the Philippines. There's a real struggle. And you have a president of the United States.
Loves dictators.
Loves these authoritarian figures. And, you know, probably the most distressing headline I have seen since the last endless 110 days was when Angela Merkel came to visit. The headline in Politico was, "Leader of the free world meets Donald Trump."
Right.
And this was so painful.
It is painful, yeah.
And it's not only, I think, disastrous for the United States internally, because he has provoked and continued these terrible divisions in our country, but he is dimming the beacon of hope for the rest of the world. People that are in prison because they demonstrated in Tahrir Square and they were the secular opponents of the regime, and people in the Philippines who lost loved ones when they were murdered in extrajudicial fashion. They look to the United States to speak for them. And it's a grave tragedy all over the world if we lose that mantle of leadership. And that's, I think, part of what's at stake, why we need to get to the bottom of what the Russians did here, what the Russians are doing in Europe, and how we fight back.
And so, in a bizarre series of weeks, it seemed like this week was stranger than even the ones that came before, because it did seem to me like he may have admitted to committing a crime. He said that he almost said word for word that he fired Comey because the Russia thing, in his opinion, isn't real. That seems like obstruction of justice. He also was asked, did you ask Comey for his loyalty? And he said, no, I didn't, but that's a great idea. Which also is illegal, correct?
It is staggering. Plainly what he did, if you can believe him, was at a minimum unethical, improper, etc. Whether it's illegal also depends on whether you think he's telling the truth. Ironically, the most incriminating things are if you believe him, but of course when it comes to Russia, you really can't believe what this president is saying. And here he's, you know, compounding that by saying, you know, Director Comey, you better look out because I may have tapes. So is it worse if he's telling the truth and he is guilty of what he accused his predecessor of, wiretapping people in the White House? Or is it worse that the President of the United States will just willy-nilly tell the American people things that are patently untrue?
But if the Republicans had on Hillary, if she was president now and said the same thing, I do feel that they would have drawn up impeachment charges already. I worry that the Democrats are still too nice, and I've asked Democrats about this before.
Well,
and,
you know,
and sometimes what their answer is we don't want to stoop to their level, to which I say, yes, stoop a little. You know what? Stooping in the defense of liberty is no vice.
Well,
and you guys, really, it's a bar fight.
First of all, I think you're right. Democrats are too nice. I'm too nice.
Well, what can we do to make you a mean little...
I'll give you a...
German shepherd who was beaten too much.
I'll give you a perfect illustration of where we were too nice. And that is, while the Russian hacking operation was going on, we knew it was going on.
You're talking about 2016, during the campaign.
During the campaign.
Obama knew.
The president knew.
Did not use it.
Well, the president didn't come out early and forceful in condemnation of what the Russians were doing. In fact, Senator Feinstein and I had to come out before our own government was willing, before the administration was willing to attribute the hack to Russia. And here you had a situation where Donald Trump, candidate Trump, in July of last year, is saying openly, never mind what his people might be doing privately, he's saying openly, hey, Russia, if you're listening, hack Hillary Clinton's emails, right. You'll be richly rewarded. And where Democrats fell down on the job in two ways. One, the administration should have gotten out there and condemned Russia and called for sanctions then, not after the election. But they were too worried, I think, about being perceived as putting their hand on the scale. And where all of us in the Democratic Party fell down on the job is we failed to persuade the American people, who largely knew what the Russians were doing, why they should care. And unfortunately, more people cared.
And why should they, excuse me, why should they hate Republicans? This is treason. This is colluding with the enemy. I mean, even what you just said about Donald Trump inviting them to hack. If this was, the shoe was on the other foot, they would not hesitate to use that. If they knew that the investigation was going on, as Obama knew, he didn't say anything because he didn't want it to look bad.
Well, and when he did say something, when the president did that press conference, I think he really did put his finger on this. And he was marveling at just what you're saying. How is it that the party of Ronald Reagan could condone a foreign adversarial party, let alone Russia, intervene in our democratic affairs? And his answer was, look, we have gotten to a point where the partisanship is such that for the party of Reagan, it's okay if Russians intervene as long as it's to help us. The reason why the Russians were successful is because we are so bitterly divided. And one of the reasons this president is so destructive is he keeps feeding those divisions. And he also keeps playing into the Russian narrative that is behind the dismantling of democracy. And that is, okay, in Russia, we're not a democracy, we're a thugocracy, we're a kleptocracy, we don't make any bones about it anymore. But you know something? America is too. They're just a bunch of hypocrites. And we have a president of the United States who goes on the, may he rest in television peace, Bill O'Reilly's program, and he's asked, why can't you criticize Putin? The man's a killer, and his answer is, are we so different? That's
a lot of killers.
You couldn't write that in the Kremlin.
Congressman.
You couldn't write that in the Kremlin any better.
Well, how about having the Russians into the Oval Office? I mean, Kislyak is their spy master in this country. He's got that Android phone. I'm not the first one to say this. The security people are saying that he's still using the Android phone after they hung her for using the wrong computer a few times to send out wedding invitations or whatever the hell was going on there. They probably already, well, they probably already own them. What am I talking about? Does it really matter that
in the category of you can't make this up, which is the category we live in now,
right?
You have photographs of Kislyak and Lavrov with the president, not because our own press is allowed in, but because the Russians take the pictures. And
so
they're
why
published
can't
in
the
the Russian
Democrats
media.
Make this sale? You're either with us or with the Russians. Remember Bush? You're either with us or with the Chinese.
You know,
I feel like that's what all I want to hear.
I will tell you this. If there was ever a time in our history where the argument there has to be a check on this executive, we need to change the Congress so there is a Democratic House or Senate or both, because this president needs a restraint, that argument is now.
Well, I feel like people are making that argument. Do we have some footage of that town hall? I mean, people are going to town halls now and yelling at Republicans based on the Russia story, right?
We need a bipartisan select committee to investigate this. When are you going to open your eyes? We all see it. Why? You don't see what's going on? You don't see it? When are you going to decide to be an American and not a politician?
Okay, that's what I want you to sound like. How can they?
I can assure you in the White House, that's what they think I sound like.
Okay. How can they govern if that's what's brewing out in America? What are the Republicans saying to each other behind closed doors? They must be shitting their pants. Come on.
Well, you know, they
It's HBO. I have to do it. It's in my contract.
You can say it, I can't.
I know.
They all want something from this president before the wheels come completely off the wagon. They want their tax cuts. They want their regulatory repeal of the mining regulations, etc.
Money.
And then they'll find their spine.
Right.
There are a few people who are speaking out, and I think, frankly, this is John McCain's finest hour. Probably his most important public service since Vietnam is what he is doing now. And I wish we had more Republicans in the House, or maybe even one in the House, who was willing to follow his example.
So I know back in March you said that the case with the Russia collusion is more than circumstantial. Can you tell us anything more? And if you can't tell us that, can you tell us, like, when you picture Donald Trump in, say, 2 years, what is he wearing, like? Is he,
you know, I'm already
orange, maybe?
I'm already trying to get the image of him in a bathrobe out of my head.
Right, I understand. All right.
You know, I don't know, honestly, where the investigation will end up. It's too early to say. It's a mammoth undertaking because it's global in reach. It involves a lot of witnesses who may or may not want to cooperate with us. We're working with a very small staff. One of the reasons why it's so important that we oversee the FBI investigation and not let that go or be impeded in any way, they have the scope, they have the resources, they have thousands of agents all across the globe. There are things they can do and must do that we can't. So part of our responsibility is doing our own investigation, and we are trying. Part of our obligation is to make sure the FBI does the job they need to do.
All right, well, there's nothing riding on this except the First Amendment to the Constitution, freedom of the press, and maybe the fate of the country. But if you screw it up, I'm going to get mad.
No pressure.
All right, thank you, Congressman. Keep doing what you're doing. I know you'll stay at it. Adam Schiff, everybody.